Hey, friends, I had the absolute pleasure of speaking with the Clown Prince of Horror, Jeff Strand, from his home in Chattanooga, where shit like this doesn't happen. And it was a total blast. He's a great guy, a lot more down to earth than I would expect for such a prolific, funny, horrific author. Just a great guy. And you'll see that for yourself momentarily once you get past this stupidity, and you could go check that out. So, Jeff Strand's got like 35 books. I recommend you get them all. He says he tells you what book you should start with if you've never read. I'll just save that tidbit. And there's some breaking news. I got a scoop in this interview because I'm like a journalist now. So, check out that scoop. And stay frosty. I know I will be because I still live in shithole Chicago.
For once, I'm not talking to myself. It's time to go beyond the book and get over your shelf.
Awesome. So thank you for taking the time to chat. I do have some serious questions about what I read. I really when I saw Deathless came out and I got a copy of it and I was dying to read it. I'm like, I have just got to talk to you because you're somebody who blends humor and horror in ways that is like, it's like my sweet spot. I read your story, Good Deeds and Hark the Herald, and it's like, this is absolutely gold. It really made this anthology it's rare when it's all killer and no filler. In anthologies, you get a mix of authors, but I think every single one of these was at least a double, if not a home run, and yours chief among them. So I was talking to this guy, my friend, and he's like, well, if you like that story, you got to check out all this Jeff Strand. And all of a sudden there's like 35 novels sitting there that I could read. And I'm like, I just love that. I just love the whole F the world attitude in this sort of the way the writing feels. And so he recommended Pressure and Dweller. Pressure being probably your least funny book, which is funny because that's what I liked about it. But anyway, so that's why I jumped on the chance, because I figured, you wrote a sequel 15 years after the original.
Yep.
So there's something there. So hi. Let me ask you, first of all, where did Darren Rust come from?
Really, no, not anyone I knew.
Yeah, that's kind of okay. Well, the FBI was listening in, so they wanted that chief question answered.
It really started with a completely different premise, because it was a book that I had come up with a long time before I wrote Pressure, and I wrote Pressure a long time ago. So I think I was like going for a walk in college or something, and I had this idea about a guy who saves the life of someone, not realizing it's a serial killer. So there's a mugging in progress. He saves the guy, and what he's inadvertently done is got a serial killer who's like really, really grateful to him. And it doesn't come out and say, hi, I kill lots of people, but it's like, I could help this guy. I'm gonna repay the debt I owe him. And then it just gets darker and darker. And then I started to think, wouldn't it be interesting if the serial killer thought, this guy could also be a serial killer. We could be a great team. So I got rid of the whole saving his life element and expanded the scope, because the original premise just took place, in a real brief amount of time. So I thought, well, no, what if it was an epic story where they meet as kids and it goes bad, and then he meets him again, and then just keeps weaving through his life. So it didn't start with Darren Rust, it started with the premise, which I changed. And then I was like, okay, what kind of character would, get sort of obsessed with this guy and think maybe we could be a good team. And so it's like, okay, what would he be like as a 12-year-old? What would he be like as an 18-year-old? And then what would he be like into adulthood?
I think that, and I could see the seed of it, the seed of the idea, this idea of you're bonding with a serial killer. Obviously, that highlights probably a fear a lot of people have, right? Like, we don't know who those monsters are. They could be anybody. You always see the news like, oh, there's a real quiet guy. Yeah, he didn't bother anybody unless he killed them. So I like that premise of that, how they grew together, and so that bond, and it is such a different feel. For example, your Wikipedia page, of course, is a font of information, and it's like you're the clown prince of horror. I don't know how I would feel about that, although the clown prince is Joker, but
it's certainly not a title. It is not a title I have ever given myself or referred to myself as. It's like I've seen it used, but I have never. I'm the clown prince of horror. It's just like, all right, I'm not going to embrace that one. But
yeah, it feels like a backhanded compliment. But I understand the sentiment. And Pressure doesn't have any of that. Is there a reason why that is such an I mean, it's a great book. I love the whole thing, and I think Deathless made me actually like it even more. But is there a reason why that's not funny at all?
I think there's quite a bit of humor in it. I think, but what happens is the book is so dark that it sort of overwhelms it. None of the events are funny except for the opening scene. I think the opening scene is laugh out loud funny, where he's trying to steal condoms and the shopkeeper, like,
that's true.
Messing with him. Yeah. And Darren is kind of a funny character. He's not a funny character, but he's witty. And so there's quite a bit of humor in it, but the book is so dark that I think it overwhelms it. Like, people don't see the humor because they're distracted by all the really dark stuff that's happening. But I think if you went through it with a little marking off every time there was a funny moment, I think there's actually quite a bit in it, not compared to a lot of my other stuff, but
that's really fair. Yeah,
not humorless. It's just, I think you don't notice it.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think, but because I think the reader's attention is drawn to that coming of age aspect, and you grow up. And when I was reading it, I was sitting there thinking, and that's one thing I thought was really great about Pressure, is I was sitting there wondering, maybe Darren's right. Maybe Darren's right. Maybe he does see something in this guy. Did you ever entertain it?
Well, it was one of those things. Maybe, obviously it would be very bad if our hero became a serial killer, but it's like, maybe he'd be happier. Maybe, the fact that Darren could be right is something that carries through, quite a bit of it. And, he's not a truly noble, heroic hero. He's got a dark side, not necessarily a serial killer dark side, but, he has rage issues, understandably, because of what happens to him.
Oh yeah.
And it gets progressive. If you treat the two books as one long story, his rage gets stronger and stronger as it goes along. And
so how was that revisiting after 15 years? I mean, so obviously the book made an impact on you as the author, that you thought it was worthy going back. What was the impetus of that?
Well, the impetus originally was just because, hey, it's my most successful book, because it was it was as close as I've come to a breakthrough book. So, and it was my first mass market paperback, and it was my first Bram Stoker Award nomination. So it's kind of like as close as I have come to a breakthrough book. It definitely did not catapult me into superstardom or anything, but by my standards, it's like, hey, this one took me to the next level. And so I thought, maybe there's another story here. And then I started it, and I said, well, maybe not. I got distracted by other stuff. And then I hit a point where I was like, gosh, it's been as long since I've written Pressure as the amount of time the story takes place, because the story takes place over, a decade and a half. And I thought, well, now I could do a sequel that takes place over the same time period without going 15 years in the future.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that is interesting. Right. And I think the first part of Deathless made me appreciate Pressure even more, because I read Pressure, and you're right, it's dark, and wow, that the trials and tribulations that Alex goes through, to just, it's almost like he's trying so hard to disprove Darren that it costs him so much. Like, instead of just walking away, it's almost like he wants to convince Darren. But and then that, of course, made me think maybe he's just trying to convince himself that those dark things aren't in there. And then because when I read Deathless, it's almost like a book club edition of Pressure in the front part, because it's recounting, and it's all relevant. It's not like, but it's like, and then he did this because obviously Alex meets Luna and starts to relive and recount some of those things. Like, wow, yeah, that was darker than I remembered.
Was that I put a lot of work into the first couple of chapters because it's a book that is really heavily informed by the original. It's it's a continuation. It's not a self-contained story. It's a it's a very serialized continuation of the first book, but the book came out 15 years ago, and a lot of people haven't read it in 15 years. So it was not only supposed to be something where you could follow it along if you've never read Pressure, but it was something where if you're like, hey, I like Pressure, but I'm not going to reread it just because there's a sequel. I wanted to make sure that people who haven't read it since the Earthling Publications edition came out in 2007 still could follow the story along. So there's
Right.
But you also don't want it to be the info dump. Hey, kids, remember Pressure?
Oh, yeah.
Remember when this happened and this happened and this happened? So I wanted to keep it, so that you're getting the information you need without it being the author saying, hi, I realize that you may not remember these details, so I'm sharing them with you.
And it was done brilliantly because it's relevant to the story. It's not like that hackneyed exposition in a bad B movie where they're like, boy, I really wish this light beam would work on the aliens, but unfortunately it's the wrong frequency. And here's why. It's not like that. Because she's so invested in Darren, and you sniff these things out and you realize that, and I thought it was definitely handled really well. And I did recommend to a few people I talked to. They're like, should I read Deathless before, or do I need to read Pressure before? And I said, well, you're at the really great spot where you could read them back to back, which I did wish I had done that, because you want to feel that, you want to feel it, you want it to be visceral. You want to walk out of that room where Alex walks out of, and you still want that fresh in your memory, because then you realize how sick those people are in the next book.
You can read them in reverse order, but Deathless spoils the crap out of Pressure.
Oh, right. No,
not one of those where I'm like, hey, people, you can read them in any order. You can, but all the surprises from Pressure are revealed.
Right. You're not going to get the level of depravity that you do when you're immersed in Pressure, but yeah, I know how this turns out, but so you can't read Pressure after Deathless unless you just want to get all those lines colored in. But I think that's, is there any plan, any idea for a third installment?
There could be, but I think it would be another 15 years. It's not, I'm certainly not going to rush right into it. It would be, hey, let's, every 15 years, I'll write a new installment in the adventures of Alex Fletcher, but there are no plans to jump right into that.
Yeah. And this definitely did have, at least more, surface, more humor that it felt like it had more humor than Pressure, where when the people start asking their questions, it's hard not to kind of laugh, like what does Darren smell like, and things like that. And I don't want to spoil too much for people. I mean, this is all the premise of the book. I'm not saying anything that's not on the dust jacket. So, you know, it's definitely a cult situation that I have to ask, did you ever watch the series The Following?
I haven't watched the whole thing. I watched, I think, the first 3 or 4 episodes and really liked it, but then got distracted by other
Yeah.
shiny objects and didn't go back to
Yeah.
it.
That was such a wonderfully stupid show. But it was in the best way. Like it was one show that I just absolutely love to watch, just because the good guy never ran out of bad guys to kill. Like this cult just kept coming at him and he just kept knocking them down like bowling pins. So there was that joy to it, but there was a similar premise to a cult of a maniac going after sort of the bonded anti-hero, or the bonded sort of the hero that's definitely Alex and Darren are yin yang.
Yeah.
And so would you say Pressure is your darkest book?
It is one of my darkest books. My Pretties is extremely dark, and Dweller is dark in a sad way.
Okay, because
So,
everybody keeps recommending that, and I keep looking for the Dark Regions Press version, because I'm like, if I'm going to buy the book, I'm just going to get the best one out there. But I got to get it, so I'm just probably going to just cave and get it on Amazon. But so
there's a lot of humor in Dweller, but it is my, saddest book for sure. And
really,
I think it's not, it's one of those, because like, which Jeff Strand book should I start with? Oh, start with Dweller. It's like, no, don't start with Dweller, because it's kind of an outlier. There's a lot of humor in it. A lot of people think it's my, if you did a survey of what is Jeff Strand's best book, I think it would probably win. I think it's the one that the most people think is their favorite, but
right.
it's, it is dark and sad. So Pressure is really, really dark. I think My Pretties is really, really dark. Bring Her Back. So I would put Pressure definitely in the top 5. And at the time it came out, is by far my darkest, but I think I have done other stuff that's close.
So what should Jeff Strand, if somebody wants to read a Jeff Strand book, where should they start?
I think something like Wolf Hunt is a pretty good start, because it's got lots of humor and lots of action and, lots of horror stuff. And it's kind of in the middle ground of the funny versus horror. So that's that's one that's sort of a default answer. I also think Blister is a good starting point. And that one's not as, it's, all my books are dark because they're horror novels, they're horror thrillers. So there's, darkness that comes with the genre, but that Blister is less dark than a lot of my other stuff. It's more of a fun, entertaining type book. So.
Yeah, that's one. I keep seeing the cover for that one, and it's like, wow. Your imagination runs away with you. That and Sick House. Some of your titles just make me laugh even before I open the book. Dead Clown Barbecue. What's it? Is it other one? Clown versus Spiders?
Clowns versus Spiders. Yes.
So how did this start for you? Why did you say, did you sit down and say, I'm going to be a writer, or did you write a few things and get your friends to, oh, that's cool? Or
I've wanted to be a writer forever. It was in my DNA. I don't know how, because my family, they are math people and science people and not writers. So I'm not sure, but I've always wanted to be a writer, and didn't want to be a horror writer. I wanted to be a comedy writer. So the comedy came first, and my first few books were not horror novels. They're just goofy comedies. And then I did a book called Grave Robbers 1, No Experience Necessary, which was supposed to be a mystery comedy. It wasn't supposed to be a horror comedy. It was supposed to be a whodunit mystery with lots and lots of humor. But then it got really, really dark. And then when it was finally published, people were like, oh, that's a horror comedy. So, oh, okay.
There you go.
I liked reading horror, and I liked watching horror movies, but I didn't consider myself a horror author. And then that did pretty well. So I did a sequel, which got darker. And then I finally just said, okay, fine. You know what? I'm going to
go full throttle.
I need to focus, because I had a romantic comedy, I had a mainstream comedy, I had a comedy for kids, and these would all be on different spaces of the bookshelf. So it's like, what can I do to narrow my niche a little bit? So I thought, I write horror comedy. And that's what I did for a while. And then I said, well, then I did Pressure, which was horror, but not comedy. And then it was sort of like, well, I guess I'm mostly a horror novelist. I sort of bounce out of the genre every once in a while, but I always come back to it. So
Yeah, I hate boxes. I do. I think it's limiting. I think boxes are for marketers and people who are trying to sell the work. Um, you got to explain it to somebody. Um, but that's funny because I was a little worried. I know that's why I said about that moniker, the Clown Prince of Horror. I was a little worried you'd be like, yeah, I don't really want to be funny. I'm trying to be this serious, this twisted horror author. But to see that your passion was comedy, and I gotta say, I think comedy is a lot harder to do than horror.
It's a lot of fun. And for my horror stuff, I tend to these days look at it as a horror novel first, a comedy second. But I also write young adult comedies, and those are just joke, 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 joke. Those are books like The Greatest Zombie Movie Ever, which is about 3 kids in high school trying to make a zombie movie. That is as many jokes as I can cram into the book. So I still have that comedy writer gene, but the horror stuff, it depends on the book. Clowns versus Spiders veers more into comedy, but it's also meant to be a legitimate horror novel. Whereas My Pretties has a lot of humor in it because our characters are witty, but it is that's a horror novel. That is not a horror comedy. That's a horror novel with some comic relief in it.
That's interesting. I think I heard one time a long time ago, and I know my wife is sick of me saying this, but humor and horror both work on the same thing in your brain. It's surprise. A good joke upends your expectations. A good shock startles you. So I think there's a lot of that same thing, and I think I certainly enjoy it. Like I said, when I read My Good Deeds or Good Deeds in here, I like, this is just it's just so perfect. It's dark. I mean, it's got a lot of horrific elements, but it's a pleasure. You don't read because you want to wallow in reality. You read because you want to escape. And I think the more fantastic that escape is, the better. Have you worked with any studios to get anything filmed, like movies?
There's lots of stuff going on, and it's all with the book stuff. I can talk about everything, and with the movie stuff, it's like, don't say a word. So I've got really cool stuff, and it has taken up a lot of my past year, which is why people are like, oh, he used to be so prolific and he's a slacker now. No, I swear I'm working on stuff. Actually, before this interview, I got a call. I was like, hey, I can't talk right now. I'll call you back after the interview. So there is very cool stuff going on behind the scenes, but with movie stuff, it's like, you can't talk about anything, and it's maddening.
Oh my God. Yeah. I can imagine, like, they want to control the introduction, the marketing, the whole, and
it's like, so a lot of times until stuff goes in development for a long time. So with a book, a lot of times if you're selling a book to a major publisher, it's, hey, here are the first 3 chapters and here's the synopsis, and they say, good, write it, and then you can announce it. It's like, everyone, my book Dweller will be published by Leisure Books in 2010 or whatever. And I can't, with the movie stuff, is like, don't say anything because movies may not happen because there are so many different elements.
Oh, right.
So there's all kinds of cool stuff, and it's like, I'm not allowed to talk about any of it. It's not fair.
Oh my God. Yeah. Has there been anything that's been filmed and put out there?
There's been some smaller stuff as far as short films go. There's a adaptation of my short story Hostel, where I actually wrote the script, and that was done by a director named Brett Kelly from Canada, and I love it. It's really when I did a event at the Alamo Draft House in Houston, we got to do the world premiere of that, so that was a lot of fun. I wrote the 3rd segment of the horror anthology film Creepers. I wrote the Gave Up, which was the comedy segment, extremely obscure anthology. Like, no one has seen it, but I wrote the 3rd segment of that. And my novella Stalking You Now was made into a feature film called Mindy Has to Die, which has played at a couple film festivals and has not had distribution yet. So
Wow.
it's complete, but I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. So that was made in a Irish film. So it's all my dialogue spoken with Irish accents.
Oh, that's cool. Did you have to change anything? Did that affect
I
anything?
didn't actually write the script. The director, George Clark, wrote the script, but it's really loyal.
Okay.
So it's,
Yeah,
it is my dialogue done in a Irish dialect. So
because I thought that when I was reading Deathless, how easily that would be. I would love to watch that as well.
Pressure, not Deathless yet, but Pressure, throughout the years has had lots of movie interest. And
I
then
don't know if I can watch
it never gets made, but it is, fairly made. People who've gone on to major things have started their careers by, hey, I'd like to get Pressure made. And
Oh,
nothing has ever happened with it. And now we're kind of like, hey, there's a sequel. And now with streaming TV shows, such things like, Pressure is divided into 4 sections. Deathless is divided into 4 sections. That's 8 episodes right there.
wow.
So
Yeah.
stuff keeps, there's ongoing interest. There has been more times where it's under option than not under option, but at this point, no one has ever made a Pressure movie. So someday.
So when they option it, do you get money from just them optioning it and then
get a little bit? The days of big options are over.
Yeah.
There was a time when it was you could almost make a living off of options, and not anymore. Now it's like a token payment, and you don't actually get paid until they exercise the option, but they don't have to exercise the option until the first day of production. So until there are cameras pointed at actors saying the lines, they don't have to actually buy the movie rights. So it can go deep into the process and you don't actually get paid beyond token fee.
Yeah. I was talking to Patrick McCabe, and he wrote The Butcher Boy, and that became a movie in 1997. And that one movie gave him the luxury to just not worry about money, essentially. Like, he could focus on writing.
One of my top secret projects is a screenplay that I was hired by the studio. It's a big studio. They hired me to write the script, and screenplays pay way more than writing books.
Really?
Like way, not even close. So
isn't that crazy?
Yep.
That to me is an absolute shame, because got all these behind me. I got another bookshelf over there. I prefer books to movies 9 times out of 10. And yeah, that's crazy. I would say a movie Pressure. I don't know if I could watch it. I don't know. I don't know if I could survive that ending, but I don't know. But that yeah, I could. I'm dying to read more. This is my tiny little stack here so far. And I was looking at Cold Dead Hands, Dweller, Dead Clown Barbecue. Of course, there's another book that you wrote with Christopher Golden, Haunted Forest Tour.
With James Moore, who is Christopher Golden's best friend.
Oh, James Moore. Okay. I had that wrong. Okay. James Moore. Yeah.
Because Christopher Golden edited Hark the Herald Angels Scream. So
that's probably why I was
and he and James Moore are best buddies, so who have collaborated themselves.
Yeah.
James Moore.
I have the James Moore Blood Harvest.
Yeah.
The trilogy. I haven't read it yet, but so
good stuff.
How was it working with James Moore on that book? Because that's a kind of a hard one to come by.
There's the book at the hardcover edition is hard to find. They're paperback, you can get anytime, but it was the end result is awesome. People love it. Still to this day sells really well. We'll see people posting, I read the Haunted Forest Tour every year at Halloween. I love it. So people love the book, but I'm a slow, methodical writer, and Jim is get that first draft out as fast as you can. And so he was always way ahead of me. And
wow,
it was, and I'm the constantly rewriting, and he's the just finish the first draft and fix it later. So
Uh-huh.
from that perspective, it was the hardest book I've ever written. And even though I only wrote half of it, it was still the hardest book.
How did you do that? Did he write a chapter and send it to you and you finished his sentences? Like,
It varies, and you can't. It's probably very hard to tell who wrote what in the actual book. There are bits where I will have written 3 chapters in a row, and there are bits where we are like trading off every other paragraph. It was not a real, there are parts where he'll follow characters and I'll follow my own characters, and we kind of stitch them together. So there is some stuff that was, certain characters were all me, certain characters were all him, but then I sort of rewrote everything to kind of make it
mhm.
have one voice. So it's not their part. If I were to sit down and read the book, there's probably a lot of stuff wrong. I don't know who wrote this. So
Wow, that's cool.
yeah, but so it wasn't I wrote a chapter, he wrote a chapter, I wrote a chapter, he wrote a chapter, I wrote a chapter, he wrote a chapter. Because like Dracula's, which I wrote with Blake Crouch, J. Conrath, and F. Paul Wilson, you can pretty much tell who wrote what because we each took 2 characters. And so every time a chapter is from the perspective of Randall the Lumberjack or Benny the Clown, there's a 95% chance that I wrote it because we each had,
Okay.
and there was feedback on each other's stuff. And there were occasional bits where you would sort of take over someone's if it wasn't quite matching what you needed to happen in the story at that one point, but you can kind of tell. And I wrote a book with just Jay kind of called Suckers. And that one, if it's Andrew Mayhem, I wrote it. If it's Harry McGlade, he wrote it. But Haunted Forest Tour is not like that. Haunted Forest Tour was this big mess that was stitched together out of, Jim saying, I can't wait for you, so I'm going to write 6 chapters ahead. And it was a difficult book, but it turned out great in the end.
So what was your favorite book to write? When you look back, you're like, oh, that's my favorite Jeff Strand book.
Okay, my favorite book is not the same as my favorite book to write. And my
Okay.
favorite book changes a lot, but like right now I'll say Cyclops Road. But I change, it'll be sometimes I'll say Blister. Those are kind of my 2 default choices for my favorites, but I also like My Pretties a lot. And I really like my romantic comedy Kumquat. So it changes. For this interview, I'll say Cyclops Road is my favorite of my own books, but it varies. The most fun to write, I think, was probably A Bad Day for Voodoo, which is a young adult book, but it breaks the 4th wall constantly. It addresses the reader. It's got the book is absolutely, completely insane. And it was a lot of fun to write that book. And then I finished it and I thought, oh my God, does the publisher realize what I was going to turn in? Because I sold it based on the first 3 chapters.
Oh,
I really, really hope that this doesn't, their head doesn't explode. What is this? And then my editor absolutely loved it. She asked me to trim back 1 chapter, which, okay, I understood because it was written at the time of all those mashups where it would be, Pride and Prejudice and zombies.
Oh, right.
Sensibility and sea creatures. So I did, and it was completely out of hand. Everyone was doing mashups of every classic work of literature. So there was a chapter in A Bad Day for Voodoo where it just completely departs from the main story. And it's Wuthering Heights with a cow in it. And it's a chapter of Wuthering Heights with just random references to a cow.
That's
That
funny.
was hilarious. And the editor's like, could you do me a favor and just get rid of that bit? It's like, all right.
Oh my God, that's I understand it. I understand editors have a job.
I thought it was fair. It's like, she let me keep everything else.
Right.
I'm not going to fight over Wuthering Heights
Oh,
with a cow in it. But
for sure. But I like crazy. Like,
the book is insane. So
have you ever read David Wong, John Dies at the End?
oh yeah, one of my favorites. All 3 books in that series I love.
He just announced number 4.
Right.
And it's if this book exists, you're in the wrong universe. What I really liked about the first one, I think the second one, This Book is Full of Spiders, is the best in the series. But the first one, what I really like about it is he wrote it with that reckless abandon. They were just web episodes and they were just little one-offs. And then when he was publishing as a book, he strung them together and he did a great job of it. But just it was almost like a contest. Can this chapter out crazy the last chapter? And I love that. I mean, just give, like, as long as it's not stupid, and as long as you feel connection to the characters, go there. Josh Malerman's new book, Ghoul in the Cape, is crazy. It's nuts. It has more of a theme or a point to it, which makes it not completely to the wind. But yeah, when you're like random references to a cow, I don't know. I would love it.
It was a fun book to write. It has a frequently asked questions at the beginning. It's a book it's meant for everyone, but it was marketed as young adult because the characters are teenagers. And there's a list of 25 upcoming sequels to it, which is always kind of disappointing because I'll be talking at a school to a 12-year-old. Like, so when are all the sequels coming? The joke, I'm sorry. But
so how do you feel about young fans? So if they read a young adult book or something like that, and then it's like, oh, well, here's Pressure, I think I'll read this. Like,
I don't tend to, if I'm in a school, I'm not, hey kids, you should read my pretty stuff. Let's stick to the books that are in your school's library. But it's fun because a lot of what I get are, hey, I never liked to read, and then I read the greatest zombie movie ever, and I loved it, and I realized, hey, I like to read when it's the right book. Because middle school librarians love my stuff, because if you have a 12-year-old boy who doesn't like to read but has to write a book report, like, hey, you may actually like this one. And a lot of times they do, because they're just insane, goofy comedies. And a lot of times you get kids, I didn't realize books like this existed. So
that's got to be a great feeling.
Oh yeah.
Because that's a lifelong journey. You flip that switch and they realize these things can contain a lot of magic. That's awesome. That's got to be very satisfying.
Yeah. And so that's the biggest joy of writing the young adult stuff, is just that a lot of times, the publisher, on our first call, I was with the marketing department. They said, we're marketing these toward reluctant readers. So, and they're not written down at all. They're written, they're written hopefully intelligently, but it's intended, if it's not my intention, but the publisher said, these are for kids who don't like to read, because, if you're tired of, all right, kids, find the symbolism in chapter 3 or whatever, like, these books are just pure fun. And so kids who don't enjoy reading because the reading is in a context of stuff they don't like and they have to write reports and all that stuff, it's, if you can just totally have fun with the book, they enjoy it. And so that's a lot of our target audience. So those are a lot of the really satisfying emails to get.
But even if you're not doing a literary critique of these books or putting them through the the feminist lens, or what I mean, like when you analyze books for an English class, even if you don't, there is depth to, like, I'm just thinking about Pressure, and getting back to what I said earlier about the darkness that's within people, and the bonds we have as humans to each other, and how that can be some of the most dangerous. It's the most necessary, but the most dangerous connection.
I mean, there's always thematic stuff, whether it's a stupid comedy for reluctant readers or if it's a really dark one. There's always the themes, but it's very rare that I'm like, here's the message I'm trying to convey. Message first, story second. It's always story, characters first, and then if you pick up on the satire or whatever, that's the lower tier level.
So when you start out writing anything, like you said, Pressure started with this idea of, what if this serial killer was indebted to or found this gratitude towards one of his potential prey. How do most of your stories start out? Do you have that sort of scene in your mind and then you build around it?
A lot of times it's just brainstorming, and it's like, okay, what horror trope haven't I tackled yet? And then it's like, okay, I haven't done a ventriloquist dummy book. And so what can I do that
it's cool
with that story? And then it's like, well, a ventriloquist dummy book is basically a slow burn where you don't, no one believes the little girl that her dummy is alive.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the babysitter is dead and no one can explain it. And I thought, well, what if I put it into a survival horror situation? What if a guy is, in physical danger trying to get out of the situation, and now he's got a ventriloquist dummy that's alive, revealed early on beyond any question of a doubt to our main character that this is what he's dealing with, making it worse. So I thought, so that was my twist, and that became Creep Out, which isn't out yet, but that is one of my upcoming books.
That's cool.
So very often I start with what subgenre haven't I done, and then what kind of twist can I give it to make it interesting.
That's cool. That's cool. And it becomes like a prompt for you then.
Right.
And yeah, that's neat. So what's your day normally like? How many hours a day do you write?
It varies a lot, and it's more and more depending on how close I am to needing the book finished. So I'm not structured. It's kind of like I get up and sort of work all day, but if I said I work 16 hours a day, I'd be lying, because I'm goofing off on Facebook, and
Yeah.
there are lots of gaps where I'm doing email or whatever, but so I can't say, I write 6 hours a day every day. I'm all over the place, and when I have finished a book, I go right into the next one, but with a much more relaxed sense of urgency than I do. Oh, the bank account is draining. I need a new book out. So let's get this thing done.
So how do you write an idea down, or like you said, 3 chapters, and then pitch it to a publisher, and then you have the deadline?
For the traditionally published stuff, yeah, a lot of my stuff now is self-published, just because I did an experiment with it a long time ago, because I was with Leisure Books, and they did Pressure and they did Dweller, and they were supposed to do Wolf Hunt. And Wolf Hunt, right before it came out, they canceled their whole horror line. So I was like, well, I can spend 2 or 3 years trying to sell a werewolf novel, or I can do what Jay Conrath has been begging me to do and try self-publishing it. And so I did that. It's like, wow, you know what? The 70% royalties are pretty sweet if you bring your fan base along for the ride.
Wow.
So these days, if I write a adult novel, I'm pretty much aiming at self-publishing. Short stories are traditionally published. I usually have a deadline for those. I just signed a contract today for a trio of novellas. And so I have a deadline on those. And so it'll be kind of, it's July 1st. And we're recording this on January 27th. So those books don't even exist. And then
wow,
in May, you'll be like, well, time to start thinking about writing three novellas. And then probably, in June, I'll start to look.
Wow. So that's like you've been falling, and then in June you pull the chute. That's
I a lot of times go with the procrastinating term paper model.
Wow.
Where, if it's due on Friday, Thursday night, you're up all night thinking, if I had started on Monday, how easy this would have been.
Yeah.
I could have written, it's a 5-page paper. I could have done 1 page a day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah, right.
I would be watching TV and enjoying life. Instead, I'm just frantically drinking coffee and cursing my laziness.
I'm sure you appreciate, though, this is how your brain works. It's how your brain's going to work. I mean, I think at this point.
Well, I've gotten also now most of my deadlines are self-imposed. So I'm more structured. But when I was doing everything traditionally publishing, you always had a deadline, and I was doing it at the same time as a day job. So I don't feel like working on Dweller today. I don't feel like working on Dweller today. Okay, I need to work on Dweller because they've paid me half of my advance, and they are going to be really, really mad if I don't meet that deadline.
So who's the publisher you signed the 3 novella contract with?
I think I'm allowed to, if I'm not allowed to say it, I'll get an angry phone call, I guess, but it's with Death's Head Press.
Oh, Death's Head. Yeah, they've come on the scene. They got on my radar. They did a book, a Joe Lansdale sort of chapbook.
That's that same line.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. They did a great job with that Lansdale one.
Yeah, they're doing basically 3 chapbooks. They've signed a bunch of authors to do 3 chapbooks that'll all, I'm hoping I'm allowed to be blabbing this, but they didn't tell me not to tell anyone. And it's 3 sets of chapbooks, not connected stories, just, hey, here are 3 brand new Jeff Strand chapbooks, and you can order the set, or you can pick the ones that sound good. Or
Oh,
whatever.
that's awesome. I will definitely be looking for that. They're so they don't have to be connected. They're not, it's not like, okay. And they're all brand new, never before
It'll be
published.
completely brand new, written just for these chapbooks. And
That's awesome. I was going to ask you, if we want to buy, what's the most Jeff Strand friendly way to buy a Jeff Strand book? Like Amazon or where?
Amazon is totally fine. You know, people will say, "Can I just order books directly from you?" And I say yes, but I am horrible at mailing stuff out.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, yes, I will sell you signed books directly, but you're going to be sending 2 or 3. Hey, still waiting on my book. Before it goes out. So, and I'm very upfront about it. And every once in a while, someone will get mad. It's like, hey, it's on my website. I directed you to the
Yeah.
with me saying how unreliable I am. So that's on you.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's because the more when I think about buying off the secondary market, I'm like, yeah, but these authors don't get any of that money. You buy.
We don't, but I tend to go with, whatever works for you, as long as you're not
Yeah.
pirating it.
Oh, right.
Any legal way you have of, if you live next to a really good used bookstore and my book is on the shelf, get it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
go to the library. I love libraries. So I'm not, occasionally be like, oh, I'm sorry, I've only read your books in the library. Good. That's what the
Yeah.
libraries are there for.
Yeah.
That's a legal method. If it's like, hey, I pirated PDFs of your book that hasn't even been published yet, I'm like, well, then screw you. But
I paid a dime for a photocopy of every page and ended up buying your book that way. Yeah.
yeah. So I am any legal method you want to acquire my books by, I'm all for it.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm jazzed about that. Those chapbooks. That's fun stuff. I just love that. And I am looking, I want to get Dweller, and I want to get now I really want to read My Pretties. That wasn't even on my radar. But Dead Clown Barbecue, just from the title. What is that about, a barbecue?
It's a short story collection. So it's
okay. So is there a title story, Dead Clown Barbecue, in there?
There is an introduction that discusses the title where they get an invite to Dead Clown Barbecue. It's like, so are they barbecuing dead clowns? Is this dead clowns having a barbecue? And they're trying to sort out what the title means.
That's fun.
But yeah, it's a short story collection.
That's cool. So I definitely will be getting those. Another interesting fact on your Wikipedia page is that your favorite authors include Dave Barry and Jack Ketchum.
Yeah.
That sums it up for me, because Jack Ketchum is that's some brain poison right there.
My book, Bring Her Back, was purposely conceived to be basically a dark comedy version of something Jack Ketchum might write.
Oh.
I took it as dark as Jack Ketchum goes, but with a sense of dark humor. So
interesting. Yeah.
Weirdly, Jack Ketchum was a big fan of my work, but he liked the comedic stuff way more than the serious stuff. Really? So he liked Pressure, but he's like, that's not playing to your strengths. You should be doing more of the really goofy comedy stuff. It's like, Jack Ketchum is telling me this. This is really weird.
So who are did you have any mentors? I'm sure you talked a bit about the community. You talked about James Moore, Christopher Golden, Jack Ketchum, Dallas. What was his last name? Dallas Mayer.
Mayr. I think it's pronounced Mayer. I just knew him as Dallas.
And so do you have a group of readers who read your stuff first and like give you notes? Like
I've got a group of beta readers, many of whom have been with me, since probably 2007. I think Todd Clark has been with me since The Sinister Mr. Corpse, which I think I wrote it was published in 2007. I think I wrote it in 2006. And I've got a group of 5 or 6, and there's occasionally trading out of people, but a lot of it has been a core group of people. And I like, here's a new book, and then they find all my shameful mistakes, and then I publish it from there. So yeah, I'm really good at self-editing, but I still, no matter how many times I go through it, something's going to slip by. And then when they catch, like, how did I miss that? I went through that paragraph 50 times, but a lot of times you see what you think is there and not, you see what you meant to write and not what you did write. And
Your
so
brain just fills it
as
in.
good as I am at self-editing, and I've been told, by big New York editors, wow, I've never seen a manuscript this clean, but
Wow.
still stuff gets through. And so you need those extra sets of eyes.
Yeah, that's the one hang up about self-publishing is that, if you're going to self-publish, you have to build your team before you commit the book to actually get to the readers.
Yep.
That's got to be rough in some ways.
Yep. So yeah, I'm good at self-editing, and my wife, Lynn Hansen, does my covers, and she's, she doesn't just do my covers. She does covers for Jonathan Mayberry and did a bunch for Christopher Gold, and she did the cover to the latest issue of Weird Tales magazine. So she's got, good credits far beyond doing my covers. So I have that luxury where I have, professional cover art, automatically.
That's cool.
And then I've got, I'm able to produce, clean manuscripts. So it's, for me, I've got the infrastructure in place to do a professional level product through self-publishing. But
right.
you don't have that. You're paying for covers and you're paying editors and stuff, and it's a little bit less convenient of a process, but I'm lucky.
Yeah,
get that
for sure. And I got to ask selfishly, how do you like Chattanooga?
I love Chattanooga so far. I haven't been there that long and haven't had a chance to explore a whole lot.
No.
So it's like, I certainly love the house. I've got, in the background, you can see my bookshelf. I didn't have my own office in Atlanta. I would either write on, at the kitchen table or
oh wow,
sitting out in the backyard. So now I've got my own dedicated space. So from that perspective, I love Chattanooga. Everything so far about it I love, but I haven't had that much of a chance to say, let's go explore the wilds of Chattanooga and see what magnificent city has to offer. But so far, where I'm only a few weeks in, I really like it.
Yeah, because we're thinking about moving too, and Chattanooga is on the very short list of two places. Yeah.
The other one.
Well, we were looking at Knoxville and East Tennessee.
Okay, so you're close either way.
Yeah, we were looking either of those two places. We spent some time in Knoxville. We spent some time in Chattanooga. Loved it. Loved Chattanooga. And so yeah, it's just a matter of doing our homework and figuring out. I think we're in Illinois now, so it's a hell of a lot further than, from Atlanta. What is it, like an hour to Chattanooga?
2 hours, yeah.
Oh, 2 hours, yeah. So it's a lot easier. We're trying to do everything.
Do it, Chattanooga.
Huh?
Do it. Come on down to Chattanooga.
Yeah, I have to. I totally.
Or Knoxville's close. That's 2 hours. That's no big deal. We can lunch and stuff. So.
Are you going to be doing any book tours anywhere? I saw recently on one of your posts you were at a table with all these books for sale.
No individual book tours right now, just because everything could possibly get canceled. I'm hoping that this year we'll return to the full allotment convention. So, plans are StokerCon, which I go to every year. Scares of Care is going to have two conventions this year. They're going to have AuthorCon in April, and then their regular one in July. Nikon, KillerCon, Multiverse. So I'm hoping to do all those conventions, which have been, not all of them have happened over the past couple of years. So I'm hoping we get back to a full list of 2022 events. But right now, my first one will be Scares of Care AuthorCon April 1st. So that'll be a good sign. If I go to that, then maybe.
Where's that at?
It's in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Okay. There's also
Scares of Care is every year in Williamsburg, Virginia, but Scares of Care covers a lot of stuff. It covers authors, movie stars, lots of different stuff. And the April event is just going to be for authors. So it's all the time.
That would be what I'd want to do as opposed to anything else. I did go to Days of the Dead in Chicago. There's a Days of the Dead that's going to be happening in April in Atlanta. But
I've been to the Atlanta version, and it's fun, but the book component is very, very tiny.
Oh, nothing.
It's
Yeah.
like we're off on this other track. We're not even going to put the flyers up on the wall. It's hard to even know that there are authors there. And then you kind of Sunday at 5 o'clock, right before the convention shuts down, here's an hour block where you do a reading and then get out.
Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, I went to the one, they had one in Chicago, and Clive Barker was there. He was sort of the tent pole, you know, the big star. And even with an author, a big best-selling author there, books, everything was Funko Pops and DVDs. Like that's every vendor was.
Yeah, Scares That Care was a real outlier because they have all the media people there, and generally if you go to a convention and there's an actor from the 6th installment in a slasher series, everyone is there for that person and no one cares about the book. So I was surprised by how many readers are at Scares of Care. It's not just other authors, it is hardcore readers. It's a really, really good event, even though they have all the actors and all the movie, TV, other media stuff. There are there are fans of authors there. So it's really a good event.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk to me. I love your stuff, and I'm excited to think of all the stuff that's out there that I still haven't read. My TBR pile never goes down, but this is great. Hopefully someday we'll be neighbors. I'm going to move out there. I'll invite you with Dead Clown Barbecue, and we'll serve dead clown meat because I don't know how to revive the dead clowns.
Okay, so that's fair enough. That works.
Yeah. I would think. But and there'll be clownfish. For the record, not dead clown humans. It'll be clownfish.
Oh, gotcha. All right, that's good. All right, it's a date.
No cannibalism. So, but yeah, I appreciate it, and thank you, and I wish you all the best. And I would recommend everybody get out there, start reading some Jeff Strand. It's fun stuff, and you're a great guy. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and I'll see you in Chattanooga.
All right, thank you. All right, bye.